Welcome to What's Important to You, the podcast where we explore purpose, passion, and the moments that truly matter. I'm James Dean, and each week I sit down with inspiring guests to uncover what drives them, inspires them, and what's important to them. What if caring wasn't just a personal responsibility, but something every workplace and every community should value? And how different would our lives be if compassion became part of the way we lead, work, and support one another? In this episode of What's Important to You, we explore purpose, family, identity, and the often unseen realities of caring. We discuss why compassionate leadership matters, how our experience shape who we become, and why creating a more caring society benefits all of us. Today, we find out what's important to Dr. Rosemary Daynes Kearney. Hi, Rosemary. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks a million, James, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to this. So we're going to dive straight in with the first question, Rosemary, which is what's important to you?
That, James, is a question that's actually just sent a little shiver down my spine, I have to say. It's very hard, I think, to give a very succinct answer to what's important to me. So I'll probably end up weaving my way around different themes or different topics to eventually get back to maybe the answer of the question. And I'll start with maybe the most important thing in my life is my family. I'm the mum of 3 beautiful boys, wife of a wonderful husband. We have a little puppy who came into our lives. It's a ball of chaos. Not here today, as I was kind of saying before we came on air. The last time I did something, she destroyed the office, so I had to leave her at home today, and I can hear her howling as I leave. Leave and don't bring her. And my family are the reason I do everything, the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I leave the house, the reason I go to work on sunny days when I'd much rather be out with them in the parks and in the playgrounds. And the reason why sometimes I feel very sad that I'm missing out on their childhood. But I work to provide for them, and that's really important to me. The way our family is set up is my husband is the stay-at-home dad, and we had personal reasons for that. My 3 kids all have additional needs, and we need somebody at home full time. And as the way life evolved for us back in 2010, when the recession hit, my husband was self-employed, and our first son was born with significant health challenges as an infant. And I was in a job that had a contract, career, a regular salary. And so we took the decision that he would stay at home with our son and I would continue working. And as each child arrived into our lives, we revisited that decision. He wanted to go back to work and have a career and have kind of a life outside, and I wanted to be more at home. But financially, it just didn't make sense. The cost of childcare, and also the care needs as each child kind of grew and developed, and their little idiosyncrasies came up, and little different ways that we have to navigate life with them. It again just made sense for one person to be at home. So that's where my work comes from. I'm self-employed. I have a business called Care Advocate. And it was a journey to being a businesswoman that I didn't expect. And now it's one of the most important aspects of my life to be there.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that, Rosemary, because I mean, it's, as a first point, the fact that you, with yourself and your husband and when your children came along, having to make obviously those decisions about what worked best for you and your family, your husband, and even just the way you say it, like days like today, the weather we've been having, and the choices we constantly have to make, the decisions we constantly have to make in versus, the when you're saying, oh, you would want to in some ways wanted to be the stay-at-home parent, your husband kind of almost wanted to go back into sort of employment or going back into the workspace. But as you say, the sort of, I don't know if this, the harsh reality of numbers, the harsh reality of being able to live the way you want to live, the needs of your children, you kind of have to make those sometimes tough decisions, isn't it? It's not as straightforward.
Mhm.
And I think it's a really, it's just straight off the bat, a really sort of important sort of thing for people to hear, because everyone can assume from the outside that make assumptions in how people make decisions. And it's like, well, sometimes there isn't it's just the choice is kind of easy from a practical financial.
Mm.
When you look at the cold details, it makes sense. But that's a hard thing for both of you kind of having to. Was it a hard thing for both of you to sort of, I don't know, make peace with or come to terms with, because of the fact that you almost wanted to do the
Yeah.
opposite?
It's something that we still talk
Yeah.
about, frequently. It's that balance or the push and pull, I think, of being a parent, and we chose to have
Yeah.
children. It wasn't an
Sure.
easy path always to creating our family. And so it was active decision making that we made. And so when we're looking at choices, we put the kids at the center of every decision we're
Sure.
making. And then outside of that is ourselves as people. I'm
Yes.
Rosemary. I'm a person. I was a person before I met my husband. I was a person before I
Yep.
became a mom. And how do you also keep your own sense of self, your own sense of self fulfillment, your own purpose in life alongside those different roles? And that's the same for my husband, something he
Yeah.
had to negotiate. And I don't want to speak for him. I know,
Sure.
though, that it is hard. It's more acceptable nowadays that you see, men at the school gates and running around and picking up, and yet there's still a lot of stigma about staying at home
Mm.
dads and a lot of isolation that men who are at home experience, whether it's as
Mm.
parents or as family carers. And so for him, he has his own dreams and aspirations as well. And some of those have had to be put on hold. And he's made those choices to enable me to push on and, move forward professionally. He
Mm.
was very active in encouraging me to take up the opportunity to complete a PhD, which came out of nowhere in 2020. It was always an aspiration of mine to do a PhD, and I was on the pathway before 2010. I kind of had set out the area I wanted to look at, and was making connections. Although I was working, I wasn't in academia. I'm a practitioner
Yeah.
first and
Yeah.
foremost. And then the recession came, my job changed, and then subsequently I was made redundant. So I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do a
Yeah.
PhD. And in 2020, we were all thrown up in the air, and I was doing a lot of,
Yep.
kind of goal setting and reflective pieces of work. And one of them was to do a PhD. And I had set it kind of when I'm retired and I've nothing else
Yeah.
to be doing, I'll go back and I'll do this. And a couple of weeks later, I saw on Twitter, which I don't use, and I don't use really any social media, but I had gone on it
Yeah.
because Liverpool, who my sons are big fans of, my husband,
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
won a trophy. So I went on to get a
Yes.
picture of it to show them the next morning. And the first thing that came up was this advertisement for a fully funded PhD researching online support groups for family carers. And it always seemed like there was going to be a huge barrier to entry, and that's how I
Yes.
felt. I've been out of academia for so long. How am I going to get back in? But the application was just, submit a CV and a two-page project proposal. And I thought, well, look, I can do that. My
Yeah.
family carer lived experience, my work had been working with family carers. I grew up, my mother was a family carer for 30 years. So it's an area that I just know. I've lived it, I
Yes.
know it. So I just sent it off thinking, right, I can do that. Off it went. And then I was invited for interview. And I remember coming out of the interview thinking, that went so bad. It went so bad. And I spent an hour journaling, it's okay. This opportunity
Yeah.
came up. It's
Yeah.
okay that I didn't get it. And I went downstairs to my husband because we were all, stuck
Yeah.
in on.
Zoom and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, how did it go? Oh, look, it didn't go that well. I don't think I answered the questions that well. It just really, and he was comforting me, going, it's okay. It's great you went for it, and other things will come along. And I was so busy comforting myself and
Mm.
living in the self-doubt that I missed the phone call to tell me that I was being offered the position. And so that was a real lesson for me, but I was really scared to
Yes.
take it on. I wanted it. I felt I had the capability to do it, but I just didn't know what it would be like. And it was my husband who just said, go for it. We'll make it work. Just go for it.
Wow. That's incredible. Isn't it I love those stories of almost like serendipity. Do you know what I mean? The sense of you say you don't really use social media at all. And of all the ones to go on in sense of Twitter,
Yeah.
in a sense of, I wouldn't be one myself for that particular platform, really wouldn't go on it much at all. But you say, and then the reason going on for it, just to get the photograph of Liverpool and then seeing that ad. And even it's so interesting as well that the fact of was it because the fact that you were kind of applying as almost like a shot to nothing? It's kind of like, well, it's there, might as well give it a go. And then the interview kind of almost, I think sometimes when we go into those things where our expectation isn't as high, we're kind of going and very much just, well, I'm just going to see what happens. It kind of, and you say coming out of the interview, well, sure, that was that. We carry on what we're doing. The fact that it went the other way and you got it. What was then when you actually found out you got it, convinced yourself you hadn't been accepted onto the program, and then you actually realized you were? What was that sort of feeling then?
Yeah, I think the process was very emotional. In fact, I know it was very
Yeah,
emotional.
yeah.
It was brave to put myself out there.
Mm,
And as you say, it was a shot in the dark.
yeah,
And that can be hard to do. Like I do in my
yes,
work, like sometimes you'll maybe submit a tender proposal and it's a shot in the dark, but it's low stakes. So
yes,
in that way, you're kind of can shrug it off very easily. Oh, look, that I didn't get that. That's okay. Look, I wasn't the right person for it. No problem at all. Whereas for that process, it was very personal. It was really
yeah,
putting myself out there, going after one of my dreams, like
yes,
my really deeply held dreams, something I had considered for maybe since I, knew about university, knew about,
yeah,
and not because, I mean, I love having the doctor title, but it wasn't for that. It was I suppose when I would look at say census forms, you'd be asked to fill out these forms and they'd say, what's your highest level of educational
yes,
attainment? And I would look at that PhD category and say, I have it in me to do that.
yes,
And so I felt like I was missing out on part of my potential.
yeah,
And so that was the driver
mm,
to move forward with it. And so it wasn't something that I felt I could shrug off. I was deeply disappointed that I felt, when I felt that the PhD
yeah,
had gone wrong. And I'm very upset because I felt like, well, this might be the only opportunity I have
yeah,
to do it. I
yeah,
don't have a pathway. I had talked to other people who were doing PhDs and reached out to kind of people I knew when I was doing my master's and different things like that. And it just felt like getting a PhD is really difficult. And I would have talked to other
mm,
people and they would have spent years applying for different PhDs.
yeah,
But it's what you said about the purpose. And what I've
mm,
learned over my journey is when I have articulated my purpose, and not in my head and not in my heart, it deep in my belly, which is I work out of Celtic spirituality. So
mm,
that's our third cauldron. That's the deep knowing. That's where wisdom comes out of in my philosophy. So when I'm in that space and then my heart and my head are aligned and in service of that, then the pathway's open and the doors open
mm,
and things feel easier than,
yeah,
and almost as you say, that meant to be or that serendipity. And
mm,
I've learned that as I trust that,
mm,
more opportunities present themselves to me. And when I'm really focused and when I'm really working out of that alignment, it's very easy for me to spot those opportunities because I'm not distracted by my head gets distracted by, oh, look at this over here.
Yeah.
And oh, look at that over there.
Yeah.
And
Of
then my
course.
heart is like, I want to be in service of everybody. I want to change the world for everybody.
Yes.
And then my purpose is your work is to make care prioritized, valued, and visible, and advocate for family carers in workplaces and in society. And I can even feel as I say it, the clarity of that purpose, the
Mm.
groundedness. And I say that just makes all those other bits, go away. And I'm on a
Yeah.
very clear, true path.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No. I totally get that, and the way you described it there between the head, the heart, and the sort of the gut or the
Mm,
belly, because it's exactly that thing of like the head being distracted
mm,
by all the new shiny things or the old shiny things or anything, like, you know what I mean, and wanting to do 10 million things at once, and the way you described the heart, though, that's really interesting, because sometimes we can lead with that, but it's almost just as distracting, because you say you want to try and do everything, fix everyone, help everyone, and in some ways, by trying to do too much, you do nothing at
mm,
all, because it's because there's also this thing of like, if you think that but if I don't help everyone, does that make I'm selfish? It kind of, you have that sort of disconnect. It's almost, you're feeling like you're going against yourself when you're thinking, but it would actually isn't, because you're getting so caught up in it, you're not actually being benefit to anyone, because you're trying to serve too many type thing. So the fact that when you say you really go back to that core, the way you just explained it there, so sort of with that clarity and the succinctness, it then connects to those things. You say, well, it's like, well, satisfying that part of the heart that wants to help, but in a much more sort of structured feeling where, and that comes with the head, that it's like there's a focus there, isn't there,
mm,
to avoid the distractions. So it's a really good example of the head, heart, and gut that I've heard from someone in a real practical way, but leading from the clarity coming from the gut, which is the real purpose, and then coming back up, because sometimes if we just lead with our head, we don't even go further south.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
We just You just stay up in the head,
Yeah.
because it's just about practicality, and it goes back to that coldness. It's just about numbers and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Mm, absolutely. And it's taken me years to understand.
Mm.
I have a friend who does cross professional supervision with me. I engage in Celtic spirituality. I've always been a
Mm.
reflective person, journaling, and I suppose in search of answers to bigger
Mm.
questions. I've been a very questioning person since I was a very,
Mm.
very child, very young child. And yet I knew my purpose as a child, not with that, I suppose, that clarity of
Yeah.
thought, of articulation that I have now.
Sure.
But I was raised in a Catholic household, in Ireland in the 70s, 80s. It was, a pillar of our
Mm.
community. I spent a lot of time at church, a lot of time in choirs, a lot of time in masses. And my aunt, I have an aunt who's very close, and she's a nun. And she told me, like, when one day we were walking home from mass, and it was one of these stories about, I think there was a person, I've forgotten all the Bible stories now, so don't kill me if I misquote it.
Yeah.
But it was about, I think a woman was getting stoned for her sins, and Jesus came up and he started writing in the sand, and then everybody went away. And I said to my aunt, what do you think he was writing? And she started saying things. And she said, then I said to her, I don't remember the story, but she said, I think he was writing down their sins. And when they saw it, they realized that it could be them in that position.
Mm.
And she always says that to me, like I was maybe 6 or 7 at the time. And she was saying it to me to remind me that I've always questioned, I've always thought, I've always pondered, I've always reflected, and I'm open to, other people's perspectives as well. And I was reared in, the Catholic household, my first job that I wanted to have was to be a nun, and I wanted to be a missionary nun and to go off and, work in communities to support them, against injustice, against the powers, imbalances of powers, and and to have a positive influence in life. And that's the example that I had seen most commonly was
Mm.
missionary nuns. And then as I grew up, I wanted to be, a human rights lawyer. And it was, so I was working with Amnesty and different things during secondary school or teenage
Mm.
years. And then my friends kept reflecting back to me, you're a really good listener. You're really good at helping us, support us with, challenges that come up with us. And what I've noticed about myself is I'm not afraid to go into the hard stuff or to sit with people in
Mm.
distress or discomfort. And I'm able to hold a complexity. I think because I live in a complexity of life, I operate through different roles. When you're a carer, there's so much stuff that's going on. You can have days where you're just on the phone, from one service to another, about different, your different kids, and you're like, are you moved
Mm.
out again? Or you're filling out forms, or, there's all of that complexity of thought and complexity of role and complexity of
Mm.
practicality going on. And so I've learned to be able to navigate that and then be able to step back and recenter myself. And it's a
Yeah.
practice. It's not easy. I'm not, it's something I work
Yeah.
on. I'm not perfect. There's days, when I'm completely uncentered and not able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
articulate myself or completely
Sure.
frustrated with stuff. But I've tried to develop those natural tendencies that I have to use them as a
Mm.
support for my work and for my life.
Yeah. Oh no. Thanks for sharing again. It's always interesting to see what were people's initial sort of pathways or ideas or thoughts and things, um, and obviously early influences. From you, you kind of touched on it, obviously, in relation to why you work within the space of care, um, for your own experiences, and then it was experiences when you were younger. Is it was that always the sort of then the plan to work in that? What would brought you, I suppose, to work in one in this industry and then to work for yourself?
Yeah, no, it wasn't the plan. I was going to be a counseling psychologist, and I
Okay.
did my undergrad degree in psychology. And in Ireland here, you have to be at least 25 before you can go on to do your master's in
Okay.
counseling, which is a really good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So my friend and I went off to Edinburgh and we lived there for a year. And I actually worked three jobs there to build up my experience. I worked in a school with
Mm.
children who had been excluded and were kind of high-end behavioural challenges. I worked care in the community, so there was this move out from it was deinstitutionalization, people moving out of institutions into the community. So I worked in a home for older men who would have had significant intellectual disabilities, who had been institutionalized all their lives and now are living in the community. And then I volunteered on a helpline as well. And I did that for a year, and I've always been driven to travel from being a missionary nun. I wanted, to get out
Yeah.
there and see the world. So I spent 14 months traveling. I did 9 months in South America. I went to Australia to visit family, and then I went to South Africa, to Cape Town. And I planned to be home for Christmas, but I loved Cape Town. It's a beautiful place. And I also didn't know what I was going back to. So I
Mm.
couldn't get on the plane. And I said to my parents, look, I'm not sure about coming home. And they said, look, just stay. You only get one opportunity to, do these kind of things. Someday you might be
Mm.
married and might have kids, and,
Yeah.
your freedom will be curtailed.
Sure.
So they said, just stay there. And I volunteered in a project. It was food redistribution. So they would take food from like the Houses of Parliament or factories, things that we consider waste. Like, so we have our nice, the fillets of fish, fillets of hake. So that's what gets sent up to us here in, kind of Europe. And then the food redistribution would take all the other parts of the fish and bring them out to, community groups, and then they would cook them up and And
Mm.
as I went through that, so with my work, what I realized, kind of particularly with the kids who were excluded was, that their support workers were explaining to me about all the structural challenges these children.
Mm.
It wasn't that they were badly behaved. It was that they
No.
were born into circumstances, and there was a lot of structures around them that, were having heavy impacts on them and on their lives. And then I would have seen that through traveling through South America. I remember being in Bolivia, traveling by myself, and a lady, I don't know her age, got on beside me, and I could speak fairly good Spanish at that stage, and she was asking me, she was like, "How are you here? How are you a woman able
Mm.
to be here and to travel by yourself? Where's the man that would be with you?" And so I was explaining to her, where I live, you know, it's a different cultural side of it. And again, with this food redistribution, seeing the kind of the structural elements, but also this link between what we feel is normalized where we're born, and then what other parts of the world are supporting or going through as well. And so that really brought me into a space where I got really interested in looking at the structural elements around people.
Mm.
And I went back and I did a master's in international development. It was in Kimmage Development Study Centre, just in Dublin. It's now part of Maynooth University.
Mm.
And it was a really small group. There was 30 of us on it. 26 of those people came from overseas countries. A lot of them were sponsored by organizations like Throcra and Concern and these big
Yeah.
global charities. And so they were working in their communities, leaders in their communities. And it was a really, again, intellectually challenging course of work. But my thesis was reflective. I was looking at my journey, what I call social location. The recognition I had struggled with certain elements, particularly in South Africa. Wasn't too long after apartheid had ended,
Mm.
and it was the first time I really became conscious of my skin color. I traveled across America, I'd been around Europe, but I was really conscious of my skin color and what that represented to,
Yeah.
within that community. Also, middle class, well educated, and the question came up, who am I to be the
Yeah.
person, who am I to think that I can, change the world, go into these communities. And so that was what my thesis was about, in this journey of understanding social location, where we're born, the systems and structures that we're born into, and how we can move into this position of allyship, which is really
Mm.
common now. But at the time when I was doing my master's, it wasn't such a common phrase. And it was Bell Hooks, the author, her book about allyship, that really influenced me there. And so I interviewed community development workers and looked at this framework and this journey. And it's a theme that comes up throughout everything I do,
Mm.
is we're all journeying. Our only
Yeah.
endpoint is, when we're in the ground. We're all
Yeah.
changing. We all have great potential for change, for development. And sometimes it's the structures that are around us that can enhance
Mm.
or inhibit that. And a lot of it comes from what subsequently came up in my PhD, but it had started with my master's, is our own internal journey, and against what
Yeah.
I'm very interested in, oppression and power, and what I've internalized as a woman, as a European, as, Irish. We come from a colonial history. We were colonized for hundreds of years, how that's impacted our psyche. It's in everything that we do, even if we don't
Mm.
realize it. We have to all
Mm.
the time battle these oppressive influences that come in on ourselves, even from the media, what women should look like, what men should look like, how we should act. They're all themes that are very prevalent now, coming up in different ways. And so the work starts within. If we don't know ourselves, if we don't know our blind spots, if we don't know our experiences, it makes it very difficult to really work authentically in the areas that I'm working in, which is about, change and having difficult conversations. And so that's where the work I do with Celtic spirituality, and my leader there, teacher there, Mary Kennedy, we work from a principle of everything is welcome. So
Mm.
and from what is called the Cuaga, or the fifth province, which is a mythical space in Ireland. And it served, as you entered this fifth province, which was at the centre of Ireland, you laid your weapons down at the border and you went in, and it was about negotiation, solving problems. He stole my cattle, he stole my wife, she took my bees. It was solved through communication and through compromise. Weapons were left at the borders, went in. And so I work out of that, this other way of being. And that goes through my leadership, it goes through my philosophy, it goes through everything, every role that I'm doing, from research to giving awareness raising talks. You never know what you're going into. You never know what it might trigger. You never know who's living through what, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to make people feel bad or be judgmental or tell them they have to solve everything. Really, to change, you know, how care is responded to and considered, it's about conversations, and all viewpoints are valid and welcome, because we're all living in different structures, in different circumstances. Some people are business leaders, you know, they run their own businesses or they're managing huge companies. That has different set of responsibilities and requirements to the individual or the community that are experiencing care. And so it's a complex area, and my work is to hold that complexity, hold those conversations, allow an openness to come in, and then to find the solutions together.
Yeah. Wow. Again, what a
Short.
incredible. Yeah, no, love it. Like, but again, it's like, isn't it amazing though that those, it's the few things there, but it's like the willingness again to put yourself into different situations, different environments, literally, you know, not, you know, literally in different parts of the world, different environments, difficult situations, you know, in that, and have the cognizance to then, and that, as you say, that deeply reflective as you are, like to take things and to listen to other people and what it means, you know what I mean, who you are, and then again, then to not just then be listening to other people from other parts of the world and have them ask you questions and then reflect, you know, have those conversations of their assumptions, your assumptions about oneself, and you know what I mean, and then but then to then question your own sort of what it means from where you came from, and those things, and why is it the way we think. And it's one of those where you were saying there about those things we have within our psyches, or those things that we almost don't know about because of who we are. So the fact that the things that we can't help, in a sense of like whether it's our skin color, whether it's our gender, our sex, all these things that there's so much debate about them, but I think so much of it was within intrinsically within ourselves. But it's then how are those then, but it's also then what we're hearing, listening to the conversations we're hearing, the things we're exposed to that either enforce or go against that. And it's one of those things that I always find interesting, in a sense of when it comes to, say, like nationality. And as you say, like being, so whether it be Irish or British or from South America, and because the World Cup's just been played, so we've got all these sort of, and we have all these ideas of stereotypes, and there's this really my own sort of thought. I'm going on a complete tangent now, but I had to say it now. But but I think it's relevant because we have this. I'm a kind of bit of an anomaly in some ways, that people have listened to the show before, that I was born in Germany. My father worked for the British forces, so I grew up on a British military camp. My parents were there for 21 years, so I lived, and there to basically I went to university. I went to university in a town called Ormskirk, which is kind of Merseyside sort of area, sort of a half outside of Liverpool. I was to uni there for 3 years, but uni life in England is, you know, it's 8 weeks at a time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've only ever lived, I've been in Ireland now for 20 odd years, 21 years. So I've only ever lived in England collectively for about 2 years. I think I counted out the weeks. So there's these assumptions people make of, because I'm this nationality wise, I am that. And because I'm, or if a profession, you know, we go back, it was like if it was a nun, a priest, a policeman, a banker, and all these, they're as if these sort of markers of how we are as a personality are in any way related. I'm not saying they don't have an impact, But I think it's when we start using them as an excuse or a barrier or a reason without questioning it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like when you actually, well, but is that the way that we should behave in that way? Or could we be doing it slightly differently? Or can we, as opposed to thinking, oh, it's because I'm this, I think or behave in a certain way, versus from what I'm getting from you is like, let's challenge it. Let's negotiate it. Let's talk about it, because to get to the outcome of helping people or getting people to see things in a different perspective, it's breaking down those things or influences that we've been exposed to, thinking it's true all the time. Does that make any sense?
You're hitting me with the easy questions, aren't you?
Yeah, I know. Absolutely.
Yeah, I suppose the answer depends on what sort of society we want to live in and
Yeah.
whether that matches the society that we do live in. And I think there's a great divide between what we could have as people, as this on this beautiful planet that could sustain us. You know, the world, the earth is such a magnificent place.
Yeah.
Nature is incredibly powerful and vulnerable, as we know, as we bask in the heat of, I don't know, 30 degrees. It's a signal as well. Look, we're not doing the right things here for our future. And a lot of Indigenous cultures will talk about, we're guardians, we're gatekeepers, we're thinking of, my children in 7 years, in 7 generations or 3 generations. I mean, if you think back, can you name your ancestors from 3 or 4 generations behind? I know that I don't know their names or know all their names or their lives. And so we're easily forgotten, even in the lineage of our own family. And so I think we have great potential of a beautiful, harmonious world where we can embrace difference, diversity, and different ways of being. I think the challenge for that is we're only here for a short time, you know,
Yes.
maybe 60, 70, 80, 90 years if we're lucky. Some people don't get that at all. And there's a lot of unlearning or, uncovering that needs to be done from what we're born into. And it's nobody's fault where they're born into or what they're born into. That's just the luck of the
Yeah.
draw. And not everyone has the opportunity to, engage in kind of the intellectual pursuit of why are we here and those big questions, or the time to go into that reflective space, or maybe the I suppose those influences that encourage this more radical, and not radical as in I'm radicalized, but the original radical, which is from the root,
Yeah.
which is kind of Paulo Freire. That's what radical comes from. It's like we go back to the root and we uncover it from there. And it's nothing new. I'll just go back to, for people who believe Jesus was, a radical person. You could go back thousands of years more. All of history is littered with people who questioned and thought differently.
Yeah.
And the challenge for us is, are we able to sit with somebody and stay in a different point of view? And I know for me, there's certain topics I find I'm not able to do that. I'm not mature enough in myself, or I
Yeah.
so fundamentally disagree with you, I'm not able to have that conversation. And so,
Sure.
but that's not necessarily a shortcoming with that person. That's something for me to work on in myself. Can I expand that? That's what Mary Kennedy would talk about. Can we expand that? We could stay 1 minute longer with that person. What change would that bring? And a lot of the time, and where what my PhD actually was using this psychological theory of social identity, or the social identity approach, which is exactly what you're talking about. How our identities in social contexts influence, they influence our behavior. It can be a positive influence. I identify, as a runner, and I go to my running club. And so within that context, it doesn't matter about my skin color or anything. The primary
Yeah.
identity is a runner or a rower or a football player
Yeah.
or musician. That can be even more an
Yes.
important identity. But we're always influenced by those other elements as well. And all of them form part of our narrative, they form part of our story. And I think we're foolish if we ignore that, and if we kind of
Absolutely.
if we pretend that
Yeah.
history doesn't exist. The challenges of
Yeah.
how our society is structured is because it's been structured that way for hundreds and thousands
Yeah.
of years. It's influenced by colonialism, by imperialism, by capitalism. All of these elements have formed these structures, patriarchy,
Yeah.
racism, all of it comes out of that. And it can be difficult. We're talking about huge historical systems where there's powerful people at the top, and, the rest of us are just trying to get on and live our empty
Yeah.
lives, go out to the sunshine, be there for our kids, keep a roof over our head. And so it's an ebb and a flow,
Yeah.
I feel. I would love more spaces for conversations that are difficult, that don't end in binary.
Yes.
It's A or B. Again, going back to the Celtic thing, we work with both. And that was my
Yes.
supervisor, Mary Keegan, would work with me on that, because I would have come when I started supervision, and we're talking 5 or 6 years ago. I have to do this or I have to do that.
Yeah.
It's this or it's that. And she was the one who was saying, is it though? Could it be both? What would it be like
Yeah.
if it was both? So can I
Yeah.
disagree with you and still be polite to you? Can we fundamentally disagree and still recognize the humanity in each other? And what I'm working to do with people is to unpeel some of that into what matters to you, the theme of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we talk about what's important to us, we move from those binary places, and we move a bit.
Yes.
We can weave the narratives of our identities through our stories without it feeling confrontational or feeling judgmental to other people, because we're coming out of our lived experience and our stories. And it's a very
Absolutely.
powerful way of working with
Yeah.
people, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But that point about that sort of the binary thought process, the one or the other, the or that, is like, it's a really interesting, because it's definitely something that I've been working on for this year, because I would have had that very much that binary perspective. It was, I think, and again, it's when you're questioning these things, it's like a tangent on ourselves, and you're trying to learn more about yourself and why you do the way you do, or things you do, or why other people do it. The first thing is to approach it with compassion and not judgment, because if you approach it with judgment, then there's a wrong answer, and then you're going to find yourself, beating yourself up, or getting into this sort of, or blame and all this sort of stuff. So it's kind of like, approach it with a curiosity and compassion for the situation that it is, and then be willing to sort of question and do things differently. So I would have had that perspective of the sort of one or the other, the or, the at, without the and various different sort of projects that I'm trying to do, and different things I'm trying to build to work for myself. And some of them they seem almost unconnected. They don't seem to they seem to be at the opposite sides. So it almost looks clear that there should be a one or the other, because they don't seem to sort of merge together. And it was my wife who says, why can't you just do both? And I couldn't give her a real answer of why I couldn't. And it was because she's come from that perspective of her way of doing, was just like, well, just try it all. You know what I mean? It's, and there's pluses and minuses of sometimes of doing that, because if you try and do everything, do you get anything done? Or, you know what I mean? And that, like, so sometimes but it's an element of when you focus, how you focus, but as opposed to sort of giving something up that you really don't want to, because you're forcing yourself to make a choice. versus can you make it work, or can you pause, can you play, can you, all those sorts of things. So I think it's a hell of a shift as well. When you kind of come from a certain way of being or certain perspective, to challenge yourself to think and then act in that way, it's not, as you said earlier, in some of the other contexts, it's not easy to do this stuff.
And I think
But
what you said about compassion is really important. And
yeah.
I would talk a lot about kindness, looking at yourself
Mm,
with kind eyes,
mm,
recognizing that all of us are wounded, all of us have trauma,
yeah.
none of us have escaped unscathed through
Yeah.
this journey either. Everybody has
Sure.
stuff. It can be different, you know, and yet though, I would know for myself every so often something, I'd see something or that it would remind me of something difficult that happened to me, and I
Mm,
could well up with tears, or it brings my mood down. All of us have those elements there. So
yeah.
fundamentally, we're all human, and we're wounded humans, and we're all navigating this short span of time that's presented to us. And so having that kindness in how we speak to ourselves, firstly, influences how we can speak with each other and listen with each other and bring compassion into all of our interactions. And
Mm,
that's something as a family, like my husband and we've had training in compassion focused therapies and works because of stuff that we've gone through.
mm,
And that is, it really changed the dynamic of our relationship, how we spoke with each other, how we spoke with ourselves, and what we were bringing as, the guardians of our little people as well, who are now, you know, taller than me nearly at this stage.
yeah. 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 Yeah.
One of them likes to look down on me and keep telling me I'm small, So that compassion, it's a real, it's a real skill and
Yes.
practice that we have to work on. What what comes naturally to us is that harsh voice, or that, you know, judgment, as you say, or that punishment
Mm,
part of,
mm,
I should be doing this because A, B, C, D. I battle that all the time as well, and that self-doubt and imposter syndrome, all of those things are very prevalent. I think they're, it's like
human.
recognizing that's our shared humanity, is that
Yes.
those difficulties, and surviving those difficulties, and recognizing that not everything is equal. Not everybody's experience is equal. Some of us are born into different circumstances that make life harder than other people. And some of us are born into circumstances that you might say, you'd look at them and go, gosh, don't they have it easy now? I don't know what they're complaining
Yes.
about. And yet
Yes.
nobody knows what's happening, for anybody else. And so that compassion, as you say, and kindness is really, really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, because I'm really focused now, because we've seen the poster in the background about the care
Yeah,
advocate, which is your business,
yeah.
I suppose, for the better word, of what you do. Tell me what it actually is you do from that perspective.
Yeah, so the care advocate was born out of my lived experience. It's about making care prioritized, valued, and visible, with a particular focus on workplaces and working family carers. My own experience, I am a working family carer. I was an employee, was a working family carer. And when I approached my workplace around supports, initially the support was great. And as the caring journey went on, tensions arose between what I felt I needed as a carer, what I was applying for support, and then what they needed from me as an employee. And ultimately, I had to make a choice between caring for our son or having financial security. And
Mm,
that choice is why my husband is at home, and we've set up our family the way it was, because my job could provide financial security, and he was the person who was available to provide the care. And that really impacted me. It set me on this course.
mm,
I would say that experience is like one of those foundational, or those key moments in your life. If you look back and you're tracking out, this moment
yeah.
and that moment, that decision point that I had to make. And I can understand the business perspective of it. At the time, I was quite upset and quite angry that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yet I'm a business person now. Organizations, they're set up for particular purposes. Some of them are for profits, other are to serve their communities. All of them have objectives that need to be met. And care, when it comes in, is disruptive. It's probably the most disruptive element that comes in. It tends to start with what I call an earthquake. So something unexpected happens in your life. We
Yeah.
didn't know my son had health conditions until after he was born. And so we had no preparation for what the first year of his life was going to look like. Completely unexpected. So that's the earthquake. And organizations are quite well set up for that. Your spouse might have a cancer diagnosis, your parent, has dementia, and there's structures in place that can support the earthquakes quite well. But caring is, I talk about ebb and flow. It's a journey of tremors. The longer caring goes on, the more low level tremors and aftershocks come in. And I use these metaphors specifically because it's all disruptive. It's all shaking. You're never on stable ground. Some mornings I wake up and I have a complete, a plan in my head, and then before 8 o'clock, it's completely derailed because something has happened that was unexpected. It's not. We're not heading off to the hospital, but it's really shaken the plan that I had for my day. And workplaces aren't designed for that. Businesses and organizations need stability. They need to be able to plan. They need to be able to forecast. They need predictability and reliability. And it's not that the worker themselves becomes less dependable or less reliable or less dedicated or less willing to do the job. It's the circumstances and the responsibilities that are pulling at them that can make their, I suppose, I don't want to say freedom to work, but it is a freedom to work. More constrained. And care has been within workplaces, it's considered an individual issue. And we're working, I go to my manager, she supports me, and then and what organizations are failing to see is that actually this is a complete workforce issue. It's a structural issue. About 15% of employees who are carers will leave their job each year. Another nearly 15 will either not take on positions of responsibility, so they won't go for that promotion, or they reduce down their hours from full-time to part-time work. And so it's having a massive impact on workplaces now. It primarily affects women in their midlife, mid-careers, and it's something that's only going to grow because our population is changing. We're living older, longer, with chronic health conditions, and more people are going to become carers. And so this is really about, first step is awareness raising. It's an unknown, unconsidered risk within workplaces now. It's just not on the radar anywhere. And so that's the first step that I'm doing. I do talks, work with equality, diversity, inclusion officers. It falls into social corporate responsibility. These are all the headings. But really what I'm doing is working with people who are in organizations to help them know their employees, know what's really happening, and understand, like, if you go out there and ask, I do a lot of work with the HSE, it's predominantly women, over 90% women. And when I said to them, how many family carers do you have? They didn't know. And this is the care service. And, it's in the business of care. And yet we're not even considering what, the impact care has on our lives and on our workforces. And so that's the first step that I'm doing. And then I still work a lot with research. I'm doing research with Family Carers Ireland. I do some research with University of Limerick around this area as well. And that's to give that really strong evidence-based foundation for the programs of change then that I've developed as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's there's so much in it as well. And I think it's, when we were talking earlier about the whole thing of perception on different things, we were talking about, the bigger subjects in relation to identity, to do with like nationality and stuff. But from my sort of exposure to care, which probably be talking to other people like yourself on this show who are coming from a different perspective of what they do. Otherwise, it's generally on the news of saying how bad a situation it's in. That's the narrative that we're told about care, is how poorly funded it is, how poorly under-resourced it is, how expensive it is. It's all negative. But we don't even get into one layer under, which is kind of what you do, how that has an impact on the individual, the carer, the person who's being cared for, and then how the further down the stream is the lives, and some part of most people's life is some sort of employment, career. And then, because you're saying about it's mainly impacting women in that middle age, am I right in assuming then it's also they could be then caring for an older person and or children as well? So they're trying to manage
that
both sides.
sandwich care thing.
Yeah. And so we don't, and obviously you the care advocate, because we don't hear that side of it. You know what I mean? So my ignorance is from the perspective of one. Obviously, it's not something that I've looked into for myself, but what going back to what I'm exposed to is just how bad it is, and that's an awful narrative to just constantly hear.
I wouldn't call it ignorance. I think,
Mm,
it's very hard for us to know something unless it personally
sure.
affects our lives. So I
Yeah.
think exposures is a
Sure.
nicer term. It's
Yeah.
again that
Sure.
non-judgmental, kinder
Yeah. Yeah.
term to yourself. And part of what I'm doing is to change that narrative is real and true, and I've lived it.
Mm,
I've lived the
yeah.
financial challenges just having a social welfare payment, and we're very lucky in Ireland to have it. Other places don't. And at the same time, we were able to make ends meet and nothing else beyond that. So we could pay our bills. The kids didn't have, play dates or after school activities, things like that. So it brings that, again, that level of constraint to people. And at the same time, caring, it's rewarding.
Mm,
It is about the people that we love, those people that are
of
most
course.
important to us. For some people, there's very complex relationships. I've worked with people who were caring for ex-spouses or parents that where their childhood had been, maybe tough and abusive, and so there is that complexity there. We
Mm,
don't want to they're all heroes, they're all, and I think language is really important, and so I'm very careful around things like superhero. This is just the circumstances of life that has presented itself to me.
mm,
And these are the people that I love, and I want to be able to look after them the best that I can.
mm,
And I'd love for society to support that more.
mm,
Care for me, it's a fundamental part of our human experience.
mm,
We all care in, whether it's care for our animals, care for our spouses, care for our environment, our plants. And then family caring is when we have additional responsibilities beyond what would be, considered normal, for want of a better term.
yeah.
You have your spousal relationship, and then when family care comes in, that adds additional responsibilities that you weren't expecting or maybe had considered. And that's just an example, or that change of relationship where
Mm,
your parent is there, but now you're the one looking after them, making
yeah.
decisions, feeding them, clothing them, doing personal care. And that's the reality of life. That's always been. Our communities
Yeah.
were set up to have care at the centre, and we've lost that. I feel
Yeah.
we've lost what being a caring community looks like. What does it look
Mm,
like to you? What does it look like to me? And how can we navigate towards that? Recognizing that we're in all these systems, we're in all these structures, and so it's not easy. I can't wait. I'd love to wave a magic wand, but I can't.
mm,
And you can't.
yeah.
So there's incremental work, and I suppose in the networks of people that I'm with, I've recognized I don't have to do it all. There
Mm,
are lots of other people out there, and each of those has their spoke in the wheel. And as we create these connections and communities together, that adds more impetus, more visibility, more voices, and all of that will contribute to change into the society that I'd love us to reach.
Absolutely. I mean, it's because it's the point that you were saying as well of how important it is, and the work that you do, how important it is, because in Ireland especially, but across most, I don't like the term, but we say Western countries, but across the world, it is an aging population. We are living longer, but living longer doesn't mean living without challenges. Do you know what I mean? So we can still see the rise in things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, these conditions that people are able to live with for longer, but not necessarily live independently with. Do you mean that? So there is at some point, like as you say, there'd be that sort of earthquake moment, but in some ways we might be seeing, we can see it's going to happen, because we can see maybe with a family member that it's going, we just don't know when it may happen, because you can see things happening, but it hasn't got to a point as yet, so it is going to have an impact on so many more of us because of just the sheer volume, the numbers, you know what I mean, like they will. So it's the fact, and I'd say it's, again, it's one of those things, and you're right in the sense of like it's exposure, because if you haven't had that lived experience, then it isn't as going to be as impactful, as important to you. But it's like if and God, when it does happen to anyone, like the fact that there's people like you out there gives a starting point as well, and sense of knowledge, and because I'm sure it's like the community, once you're in it, I'm sure is incredibly supportive. That's the actual people who are in that and work and do it day to day.
I think it's a topic that touches everybody, and when I have
Yeah.
these conversations, very often the reason I get in the door is because somebody has lived through that experience
Yeah.
in some way,
Sure.
and in their family. So it might be their sibling, their niece, their nephew, a friend, their child's friend. It's not maybe directly them, but they've seen it, and
Yeah.
it's that perspective. I think, you know, again, it goes back to that fundamental part of life that we can't we can't escape it. We're all
No.
going to age. We're all, if we're lucky, we'll age well and get, into our elder years relatively fit and healthy.
Mm.
you know, but our bodies do have a natural expiry date on them,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
start to break down, or we can just be unlucky and be crossing the road
Yes.
and get hit by a car, or fall down the stairs. You just don't know. All life is unexpected, it's unpredictable,
Sure.
and that's a challenge for the structures because they want to be predictable and they want everything to be the same.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it's really important to highlight that caring can have positive health
Yeah.
impacts as well. Different studies have shown, when you look at different factors, that people who engage in caregiving live longer and live healthier than people who don't. And I think that taps into, those deeper parts of ourselves, and if you meditate and you come out of it and your body feels better. And I think when you're able, it's almost like a devotion into those that you
Mm.
love. It impacts, us on a cellular level. Like we're destined to be caring people.
Yes.
That's part of who we are. It's in our DNA, as well as, to be the hunter gatherer. You know,
Yeah.
our communities were here because fundamentally we had
Yeah.
care at the center of how we've lived. And
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so when is it primarily then for what you do then? Is it primarily about talks? Is it primarily, or what else, other sort of, for a better word, other services that you provide from the sort of the care
yeah,
advocate?
so at this stage, it's really, as I say, that awareness raising and the talks, and
Sure.
and then behind that, then I have a follow-up program called the Caring Workplaces program, and that's a three-step model to look at what we call these tensions,
Mm.
and then how to create a state of equilibrium. And So it's a three-step model. It involves research, with your workforce, going through a series of questions, and then from there it's setting out different action plans and different steps that can be taken. And again, it's incremental, no magic wands. We're talking about real
Yes.
practical solutions that take account all the different perspectives that are there.
Well, I think that's the reason I asked that as well, because I think that's the really sort of the extra importance and such, because I've worked in sort of organizations long enough in a sense of you'll get a keynote or a speaker or someone, and it massively, like yourself, could be really impactful and educational and that, but then there's nothing after. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so it's one thing hearing about how things could be amended, altered, structured, or rechanged, but it's sometimes then it's the person obviously within the organization isn't the expert in that field. So the fact that you have something that then organizations can then actually implement, because the one thing that, as you said earlier, the one thing generally that companies are going to do it is implementation, about putting in plans and processes and things in place. It's having, though, it's being able, it's to that they need the expertise from that particular field to how to do it. So I think that's that sort of having that additional sort of program and being able to help organizations or companies go, but this is how you do it. This is how it can work. And as you say, iterations, step by step, implement. It's not going to be as you say, the magic one fix, but it's something there, because it's one thing hearing about it, getting the exposure, the execution is the next thing in it. So I think it's fantastic you have that additional piece, because so many it's just a one and done. That was a lovely talk.
I think one of the barriers that particularly organizations are particularly afraid of is what's it going to cost. If we're
Of
talking
course.
about like this structural change, systemic change, what's it going to cost? And what I say is you're already paying. You're already
Yes.
losing your employees. Like, what's the cost if that, person who's in that leadership role steps away, not just in terms of the gap that you'll have, while you're waiting to recruit somebody to fill them, then you've got all the training costs and everything. But that loss of institutional knowledge, they know how to work with that particularly tricky client, or they know they've been there so long, they know the different relationships, and all of that, has a value, whether, all of it has a value, I should say.
Yeah.
And so if you're losing that, if you're losing those key people, or those people who, know how to fix the photocopier, or are there dependable on time every day, they open the shop, they're know the till system, all of that kind of stuff, that real
Yeah.
knowledge. If they're reducing hours, they're not being able to push on with their careers, you're already paying for it. And so the
Yeah.
program that I'm working with for organizations is to demonstrate the cost of care at the moment when it's unattended to. And in 2017, in the state of Massachusetts alone, it cost businesses there nearly $1 billion. I just got a shiver again.
Yeah. It's
$1 billion.
just
And most of that, 70% of that, was in turnover, that in employee turnover.
wow.
So the costs, it's already,
It's
it's
there.
already there. It's
Yeah.
unseen. And this is what I talk about. It's
Yes.
like an iceberg. And I use that iceberg,
Yeah.
what you see,
Yes.
and then actually what's happening beneath that. And so the program I'm working with is to bring, as I said, I don't mind going into those difficult places and bringing those unseen parts into the light. And if we hold them in a space that's not judgmental, it's not the blame game, and we're talking about practical, human-led, practical, consistent
Yes.
decision making. And really that's what it is. Like, if you don't know the information, if you don't have the knowledge, you can't make informed decisions. So if you're planning now for 5 years and you're not taking care into account, your plan is missing a key piece of information. And so
Yes.
that's a real piece of value that I bring into
Yeah.
organizations.
100%. Absolutely. And that's when you start, when you really, as you say, there's the two sides to everything. There's the sort of the human side of it, obviously the person who's having to manage the situation, that they're the carer and then trying to be employed, and what they're going through as a person themselves, and everything that they're having to deal with on a emotional level themselves, practical level themselves, and how I think there's probably obviously a lack of understanding of from the employer side of what that actually means. Because again, if you're not exposed to it, how do you manage? How do you deal with yourself when you've got an employee who's kind of, so how are you able to approach those conversations? All in that human side of it. But when you then go present, but this is the cost that you're paying at the moment, or this is what you're not sort of taking into account, and it's a big number. That's the thing as well. It's like people, because as you say, because they're not necessarily looking for it or don't see it, they just say it's just like seen as just the churn. Do you know what I mean? It's just on the books versus the real getting into, well, why is this happening? And it's like, it's also that thing is like, and sometimes I'm sure there's probably some companies or some small business, whatever, that have not been impacted at all. And that cliche of, well, it's not hit us now. It's not gonna impact us, you know. But as you say, it's an earthquake. And it's, so if you not have that sort of knowledge in the background, or that sort of if and when, this is how we will, it's having it there, that when it happens, because it will happen at some point, I think the statistics are going to continue to increase. So it's, yeah, it's having it and being able to, one, have the humanity there with it if and when it happens, but then know that it's justifiable because the money says that it is.
And organizations are already making decisions for, for dealing with this, but they're doing it at an individual level, and that brings real risks as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Around inconsistency, around setting precedents, and that can impact negatively on somebody.
Sure.
You don't want to set a precedent that other people will have. And that person, I know that happened to somebody, and she left her job because what had worked, they came and they said, no, look, now other people are asking for it, and we can't go ahead and do this.
Wow.
That was a big company.
Yeah.
So, or organizations are afraid of getting it wrong, and they'll be taken to, the Workplace Relations Committee or
yes.
So they're real fears,
Yeah.
they're real things that businesses have to deal with. And how I would respond about that is, care is inconsistent, but within that we can build consistent approaches. And it's, as you're saying, it's kind of having like a run book, kind of if this, when. So we can we can work to create consistency. And employees work very well when they know it's transparent. They know, we may only have 10 part-time places, available for carers. And this is the process that you go through. And we may be only able to facilitate this for 6 months or a year, because other people will come through, and we want to create a situation for, of equity for people. And so it's very difficult to have consistency without the full picture, without the conversations. But we can alleviate a lot of the fears that organizations have, and the worries and the pressures that, I know when I talk to HR managers, they feel this pressure. We just stay within the lines of the policy, and we don't go outside it, because when we do, that's when we can get into trouble. And it's like, that's a real, true, valid position. And at the same time, how is it serving you? How is it serving your business? Is it achieving what what the business wants? What's it costing you? Because there's a cost for everything.
Everything. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I mean, it's, you can. And sort of my final question on this part of it then is like, what's the, I always like the before and after. When you've worked with either, you obviously don't have to name them, but worked with a company where you've gone in and sort of done your sort of talk or gone through the program, and how they've come out at the other side of it. What's the sort of the change that you've seen?
The case study, I'm at very early stages in working with my clients, so I wouldn't have worked through the full programs. And as I said, I go back to these evidence-based studies that are there, and there are examples out there of organizations that have done it. And one of them is Centrica in the UK, and they've been working on this for 20 years, and they've seen almost $1 billion in saving. They've been able to retain their staff who have been going through caring situations over that time, because caring does tend to have an inflection point where it'll change. Things can get easier, they can get worse. The person may pass away, they may go into residential care, you may be able to get better supports. And so what you're really investing in is that employee and saying, we want you to stay. We understand life is tricky at the moment and it's not
Yeah.
enabling you, to be as free as you would like to be to just work, you know. So we're going to navigate that with you, with the expectation that you'll be able to come back to us and to do that. And again, research has shown that employees who are supported in this way are, their loyalty towards their organization increases,
Yes.
their level of productivity increases because they feel that greater identification with their business.
Sure.
They feel looked after, they feel that they were supported, they'll work harder because of that, and they'll bring
Yeah.
other people with them. They'll say to
Yeah.
other people, my workplace is a really good place to work. I really recommend
Yeah.
them, or, buy from this person because they're a really good company. That branding
Yeah.
part, that
Yeah.
responsible business part, is a
Yeah.
really key element. And so there's loads of wins for businesses that
Yeah.
come out
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, but yeah, even just the way you were saying that, I could feel it. He says, if you feel so many times what I think we want is to feel heard, feel listened to, feel supported, as you say, not trying to, you're not trying to game the system. You're just trying to say deal with what life is dealing with you at that moment in time, and feel like you're being helped and valued still in that moment as well. Isn't it incredible? As you say, then they then become an advocate for the company
They
themselves,
do.
whether it be to
Yeah.
encourage other people to come and join it, or as you say, to buy product or service from that. So you can see then obviously that the further positivity for a business to get it to invest itself within this particular field or particular thing, that it's the positives. As again, it's not to discount how much there will be challenges, but as you say, that company doing it for 20 years, it's thinking of it long term.
It's a long-term
It's
investment.
it's
Yeah.
exactly. This is the point that we said just a few minutes ago. Is like, if companies aren't preparing or doing this now, what is potentially coming down the road is this unfortunately is like, it probably will become more prevalent because more people, as you say, growing older for longer, but not necessarily without
Yeah.
requirements. So it is going to become, those percentages of employees probably will start to
Yeah.
incrementally increase in 10, 15 years time. It's probably going to be a few percentage points higher, the amount of employees that are going to be in that situation where they are going to be caring for someone.
Yeah, and there's this thing called the caregiver ratio, and it was research that was done
Mm.
in Europe. It was done a couple of years ago, and at that time, the ratio was for every one person who requires care, there would be 5 people available to do it, and that could be, professionals and family
Mm.
members or neighbours.
Sure.
By think it's 2050, that's going to be 2 to 1.
Wow.
So that's a real, and that's not,
Shift.
that's not that long away.
That's not far away at all, really. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, so much, so much in it. Like, it's incredible. Really is. It has been wonderful to chat to you, to learn more about what you're doing.
Thank you, James, for your time and
And
for your
yeah,
questions.
yeah, it's been so that word of getting exposure is definitely given me some, and which is why I love about the show and the conversations. I'm gonna ask my final 3 questions though to you, Rosemary. So the first one is there a quote or a phrase that's important to you?
Yeah, there is, and it's one that came up, and it's a business. I suppose it supports me when I'm making decisions in life and in business. And
Mm.
I did a business development course with a guy called Blaise Brosnan. He's done these courses. If you talk to any small business owner in Ireland, I'd say they nearly know him. He's done them for years. And the quote he shared was, do or don't do, but there's a cost regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And That can go across so many different things, isn't it? Yeah, but there's a cost. Absolutely. Love that. Who would you say have been the biggest influences in your life?
Yeah, I think if I track through, I think my mum has been one of the biggest influences in my life. She was the first carer and family carer. She cared for my granny for 30 years at home. And, she suffered because of it in her own health and side of things. She's the voice that I hear. She would say to me sometimes, you could be president of Ireland if you wanted to. Or when I wanted to go traveling, it was my dad and her came and presented me with the printout of a ticket. They hadn't bought me the ticket, but it was like, if you want to go, this is a way that you could do it. And even though, and I understand now as a parent, it's very hard to see your children go off and grow and you know move far
Mm.
away from you, that encouragement was always there. She worked with my dad as well, to provide us with a third level education. They've supported us when caring came into our lives, supported us with the kids, and financially have helped us out as well. So that support has been really key, and it's a model that I try and bring into with my own kids, and then into my work as well.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And I think that's like, if you think of when I asked that question, when we say about the whole thing of influence, it's how it influences your own behavior and how you live, but it's also then how you then remodel it.
Mm,
You then take on and then try and pass it on. That's, to me, like, that's that full circle thing of you passing it on away to your children, or how you then in your work or whatever. It's like sharing on those influences as well. I think that's the lovely thing with that. I think how it can have such a positive impact, that because it was one of just the thought there of, like you said before in the conversation, that we don't necessarily know our generations before, our ancestors 3 or 4, but maybe sometimes we're passing on those things that were there, those, whether it be those values or those ways of being or those little things. It might have got slightly diluted, but I think if you can keep instilling those things into the next
mm-hmm,
generation,
mm-hmm,
it kind of keeps those things going. So I think that's when true influence is showing up, is when you've got a behavior that you've learned to value, and then you try and then instill it into the next or others. I think it's a wonderful thing. As I said, Rosemary, it's been a pleasure to chat to you. I have one final question, which is, what's important for your future?
mm. Ending with an easy one.
Yeah, another great one. Another easy one.
So for me, what's important for my future is to build a successful business and then be able to exit that successful business to, have some time with my husband and my children before I get too old to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what I spoke to many people obviously on this, about who are in various different businesses and that, and they all have something that means to them. And I think it's that thing of, you kind of said it earlier, it's that word of purpose, reason why we do things. And as you say, what can we have that, for the time that we're here, have that some sort of impact? So I think obviously the business that you're trying to build and grow has such a important and really truly could be impactful sort of market. So I really hope with you, for the success of it. And on that note, I want to make sure people do know about it more aware of it, because not just to build your business, but the impact that it can and will have on their own organizations and companies. So we'll make sure links are in the notes for the show notes here. But if you would like to give a shout out now of where people can connect and follow you online.
The only place I'm on is LinkedIn. I have a personal
Yeah,
page, and Rosemary Daynes Kearney, and my business page is the Care Advocate. And you can check out my website as well. But LinkedIn is where everything goes up there. So that's
perfect.
the best in touch.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And so the links are going to be in the show notes for everyone watching and listening. If this conversation had an impact, or you think there's whether your own organization, company, or someone could benefit, make sure you check out the link and share it there, because I think it's be massively impactful and important for people to do that. Rosemary, once again, thank you so much for chatting to me today.
Thank you, James. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks for your time and for your really interesting questions as well.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if it resonated, share it with someone who might need it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or ask a question, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm James Dean, and I'll be back soon with another real conversation to help you reconnect with what truly matters. Until then, take care and stay curious.